Hi, this is Tutor Ali, and I am going to start a lecture series for the PMP exam based on the PMBOK 5 guide that was released not too long ago. I think it was the first week of January 2013. Now, the PMP exams based on PMBOK 5 should start anywhere from 4 to 5 months from now. So if you are giving your exam within the first 4 to 5 months of 2013, then you need to refer to PMBOK 4. Anyways, there's really not much difference between both. Only major difference I would say between PMBOK 4 and PMBOK 5 is PMBOK 5 added 5 new processes. So we are going to go through all the processes in brief, really quick, in short, so you understand what all these processes are all about. So I have managed to put everything onto a grid, and everything is color coded like the way that you see over here in the presentation slide. Now PMBOK 5, or for the project management professional exam, has 47 processes that you can see over here. Now they are divided into process groups and knowledge areas. So the process groups that you see are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which are initiating, planning, executing, monitor and control, and closing. Now if you go down vertically into these columns, all are the different processes related to that process group. Now all these are color coded as well. Like the initiating group, all the slides and all the processes in the initiating group are going to be in the green color. So if I slide down, all the processes that are related to the initiating group are in the color green. So right now what we see is we just have 2 processes in the initiating group. The next group is the planning group. It has the most number of processes, and they're color coded with the color orange. So if I go up all the way, I will see how many planning processes we have in this group. So the number of processes in the planning group is 24. Then we move to the executing process group, which has 8 number of processes going vertically down, and they are color coded in the blue color. The 4th process group is the monitor and control, again color coded as the color red, and it has a total number of 11 processes. And the last process group that we have is the closing process group. Now the closing process group, just like the initiating process group, has just the 2 different processes. Now when we move to the knowledge areas, which is to the left of your screen, and they are going horizontally in rows, there are a total of 10 process groups. PMBOK 4 had a total of 9 process groups. So in PMBOK 5 they added an extra process group for stakeholder management, which is all the way at the bottom. So now let's see how the process group works. So what I am going to start is with the first knowledge area, which is project integration management. Now what happens in the project integration management is we have a total number of 6 processes. Now the processes that you would see in here is develop project charter, develop project management plan, direct and manage project work, monitor and control project work, perform integrated change control, and close project or phase. Now, if you see, they're all in one horizontal row. All of them are color coded in the proper process group. So the way this works is it works like a grid, and you have to know for the exam what process lies in which knowledge area, it lies in which process group, what process follows the previous process, what process is before a certain process. So that's why it's really important to understand the whole 47 processes in a grid format. And that's why I put everything in together color coded. So if you go through these slides and my lectures 2 or 3 times, then it's really easy to remember which process group you're in. For example, if I go down here and there might be a question as to the plan scope management is in what process group? Now the answer would be it is in the planning process group. Now they could ask, the plan scope management lies in which knowledge area? So now you should know that plan scope management lies in the scope management knowledge area. The next question they can ask is, what process is followed by the plan scope management? Or the project manager has finished the managing the scope plan, what is he going to do next? So the answer would be he would be collecting requirements. Or it could be the scope is defined for the project. What's the next thing the project management manager is supposed to do? He's supposed to start creating the WBS, which is the work breakdown structure. Or they could ask, what would project manager do before defining the scope? So the answer in this case would be, before defining the scope, the project manager has to collect all the requirements. So that is why this grid is so important, and it makes it a lot more easier for us to learn and understand and relate all the 47 process groups. Now you have to understand that the main questions are 85%, I would say approximately, of the questions will come from all these 47 process groups. So this is the bulk of your exam, and you have to know this really, really well. So the way I have laid it out, I have laid it out in columns, which are the process groups, and in rows, which are the knowledge areas. So let's start with project integration management. Now when I go through the first slide, this shows the learning goals. Now what are the learning goals for project integration management? So what we are going to see over here is develop project charter, which is this one, the first process. The next process is going to be develop project management plan, then direct and manage project work, and monitor and control project work. The one after is perform integrated change control, and the last one is the close project or phase. Now it's really important we learn what the inputs of develop project charter are, just like what you see over here. What are the tools and techniques, and what are the outputs? When I go a lot more in detail of how these processes work. So I will be covering each and every single slide that you see in detail. But this lecture is just an overview of PMBOK 5 and what are the different processes that are involved in PMBOK 5. So again, it's really important to know the different colors, because the second we are on the side, we should know, hey, it's in the initiating group or in the executing group or in the closing group. Okay, so once you go through a few of these slides, then you already know what is the green color for, what does yellow mean, what does orange mean. Okay, so in the project integration management, we have a total of 6 processes. Starting with the develop project charter, this is where we develop the project charter, where the project gets authorized, where a project manager is assigned, and then to develop this project charter, what do we need? What inputs do we need? So we need so many different things. Then what are the techniques or the tools that we are going to use to develop the project charter? So there are 2 different techniques. Then what is the output of doing the whole process? What are we going to get out of it? What we will get out of this whole thing is the project charter. So that's the only document that we are getting out. So the next process in project integration management is develop project management plan. Now we have 4 inputs, 2 tools and techniques, and 1 output in develop project management plan. Now this was the process number 2, so we are left with 4 more. When I go more to the right, the next process is direct and manage project execution. Is how are we going to manage our whole project? What tools are we going to use to manage the whole project? What are the outputs of managing the whole project? How are we going to report the performance? What are we going to need to manage the project? Obviously, we are going to need the project management plan. And where do we get the project management plan from? We got it from the previous process, which is right here. Okay. So direct and manage project execution falls into the blue color, and the blue color is for executing and managing projects. Okay, now let's go to the next process. This is monitor and control project work. Now which process group does this fall in? It falls in monitor and control process group. Again, total number of 11 processes all the way down, but when it comes to project integration management, there is just 2 processes. If you look, all the processes are just single processes in project integration management. Only the monitor and control project work has 2 processes, which is monitor and control project work and perform integrated change control. Now, in the monitor and control project work, we try to monitor how we are going to manage the project, how we are going to make sure that the project is going as planned. Are there any changes during the project? If there are changes, how do we manage these requests? What techniques are we going to use to control and manage and monitor the project? So we will be going through all these tools, techniques, and inputs later on more in detail. So the next is perform integrated change control. Again, the color is red, so it falls under the monitor and control process group. And what happens in perform integrated change control is every project goes through a lot of changes. There are always changes happening during a project, during the length of the project. So how are we going to manage change? It gets really tough if we don't have a change control system to manage all these changes that are requested by the client. So we have to make sure that we are performing all the change control in the right steps, in the right process, and with the right documentation. And the last process that we have in the project integration management is the close project or phase. Now, as the name says, this means how are we going to close the project? What documents are we going to need to close the project? What inputs are we going to use for project closing? What outputs are we going to do while closing the project? So whenever a project is closed, I do update my company files. I do work with the closure documents. I have to get signed from the client saying that, hey, we approved your deliverable, and uh, and everything looks good and we're good to go. So we have to make sure we follow all the process related to close project management to make sure that everything is done on time and everything is done the correct way. The next slide that we have is not part of the process, but is project selection criteria, formulae, notes, and questions. So I have all these up, and then when I go a lot more detail in these processes in the other lectures, that's when I'm going to go through all the project selection criteria, then the project integration management questions and answers. Some questions, for example, would be, what is the business case? What is the formal project charter? What is the output of closed project or phase? What's the use of the change log? What is the tool and technique change control tools used for? What are the issue logs and change requests used for? What are change control meetings? So we'll be answering all these questions when I go a lot more in detail with project integration management. So now let's go to the next knowledge area, which is project scope management. So the first one was project integration management, total number of 6 processes. Second one is project scope management, total number of 6 processes. Now if I go zoom in just to make sure what we are going to use over here is there are total 6 processes, and if you see in planning, which is the orange color, we have 4 processes, and the red, which is monitor and control, we have 2 processes. That adds up to a total of 6 processes. We don't have anything in initiating, we don't have anything in executing, and we don't have anything in closing process group. So let's get to the first process, which is plan scope management. So obviously we are in the scope management knowledge area. So the first one is plan scope management. That basically defines how we are going to plan the scope. Now what is the scope? How do we plan the scope? Scope is basically how much work we agreed to finish for the client. For example, if I'm making a house, we agreed to make a 4-bedroom house. So I make sure that I'm offering the client 4 bedrooms and not 2, 1, or 10 bedrooms. Okay. In the scope, the client wanted 3 bathrooms. So I have to make sure that I'm giving him 3 bathrooms and not more or not less. So when it comes to construction or engineering or architecture or any IT project where the client is giving me a scope that this is what I need to be done, I have to make sure that I am just giving those many things to the client. I don't give anything more because that is going to cause scope creep, and I'm not going to give anything less because then my project won't get approved. So there are so many requirements. There are hundreds and hundreds of requirements, and everything has to be managed so that nothing is left out. So that's why we have to plan scope management. The next process in scope management is collect requirements. So now we have to collect requirements. Again, you have to know it's in orange color, so it's still in the planning group. So to collect requirements, how do we collect requirements? Who do we collect these requirements for? And what do we do with these requirements? So everything is going to go in the collect requirement process. Once the requirements are collected using the inputs, which are 5, tools and techniques, which are 11. There are a lot of tools and techniques to collect requirements. This is all the data that we need to complete the project. Then we have 2 outputs, which is again the requirement documentation, which is this is all that we've collected. And the next one is the requirement traceability matrix. Again, when I go a lot more in detail with plan scope management and scope management area group, that's when I will be going a lot more in detail in all these tools, techniques, and outputs. Now the third process is defining the scope. Now how are we going to define the scope? Scope is basically, as I already told you what the scope is, but we have to define it. Why do we need to define it? We need to define it so that the client knows what he wants and he gets what he wants. So we're going to use some inputs that go with the defining scope. What techniques are we going to use to define the scope? And finally, what do we get out of defining the scope, which is the outputs? So we get a project scope statement and we get project documents update. The fourth process, again, we are in the planning group. See the color. So you have to keep this in mind, what color goes where. So that's why it's color coded, because if you go through the book, it gets really crazy. It gets really crazy as in you cannot keep flipping pages back and forth, back and forth. So when everything is in front of you in a form of a grid, makes life a lot more easier. So the next one is create WBS, which stands for creating a work breakdown structure. Now again, what does the work breakdown structure has? Is everything that's needed to be completed in the project is broken down into small and bits and tiny pieces. Like for example, if my client says I want a kitchen designed, so then what is going to go in the work breakdown structure? So it starts on the top as a kitchen, and then as we keep breaking parts and pieces down, then we are going to have what is going to go in the kitchen. How many counters are we going to have in the kitchen? How many sinks are we going to have in the kitchen? Then what appliances are we going to use in the kitchen? What's the size of the kitchen? What's the shape of the kitchen? What type of lighting are we going to use in the kitchen? How big of a refrigerator are we going to use in the kitchen? So it keeps breaking down to the most minute, smallest part till we are sure that we are giving everything that the client really asks. Okay, so that goes in the create work breakdown structure. Again, what process group are we in? We are in the planning process group. And what knowledge area are we in? We are in the knowledge area for scope management. So we've already gone through 4 processes of scope management. Now there are 2 more left. One is validate scope, and the next one is control scope. Now both of them fall in monitor and control process group. Okay, so for example, there could be one question on the test. The project manager is doing inspection. What process group in plan scope management is he in? So you should know he is in validate scope. If I go down over here, the tool and technique for control scope is variance analysis. So the question could be asked either way. So they try to confuse you as much as they want. Only thing they want to make sure is you know your stuff. And to know your stuff, you have to make sure that you go through my videos at least 3 times. You have to make sure you have to read the PMBOK guide at least 1 or 2 times. You have to make sure that you go through all the questions there are that can be asked for the PMP exam. And only then you will pass your PMP exam. So these were the 5 different processes in the scope management knowledge area. Or sorry, 6 different processes in the plan scope management process areas. Validate scope. What validate scope does is it examines and verifies if deliverables meet the requirements and if the client is going to accept it, if it's meeting the acceptance criteria. So we have to make sure all the work is getting done right and the client is getting what he signed up for or what he's paying us for. The next one is the control scope. Now we have to make sure that we are controlling scope. How do we control scope? There are a lot of different ways of controlling scope. One of the ways is variance analysis. Okay, now as I said before, when I go a lot more in detail, I'm going to talk about each and every topic in here. But basically what control scope means, I have to make sure that I'm controlling it. It doesn't go out of control, because when it goes out of control, there can be a lot of problems. We cannot finish our project on time. We cannot, our cost is not going to be the right cost that we planned for before. So we have to check against the original baseline for the scope that we decided with the client. And if there is any change, so we are going to issue a corrective or preventive action. Okay, so that was the knowledge area for scope management. So I already finished integration management, 6 process, scope management, 6 process. Now let's go to the time management. As the name says, we have to manage time, right? Now this is project management. So we are managing everything that's required in a project. So we have to know how to manage time, how to manage scope, how to manage cost, how to manage people, how to manage money, how to manage clients, how to manage each and everything that's involved in a project. That's what our job is. So in time management, we have a total number of 7 processes. Now just looking at it, you can say that 6 of those 7 processes fall under the planning process group, and the 7th one, which is control schedule, obviously falls under the monitor and control process group. So let's get to what we are going to see in the project time management. So learning goals or plan schedule management is one of the process. Defining activities, sequencing activities, estimating activity resource, estimating activity duration, develop schedule, control schedule, and the inputs, tools, techniques, outputs. Then we have to define the time that's required for each and every activity. Then we are going to work with network diagrams and questions and answers. So again, planning group, the first process in project time management is plan schedule management. As in, we have to plan how we are going to spend the time. Schedule is the same as time. So how are we going to plan that? What are we going to need? And how are we going to manage time? So what are the tools and techniques for that? So all of them are over here. We're going to have meetings, we're going to have expert people, telling us how to manage the time. We're going to use some techniques how to manage the time. We're going to use some documents, some historical documents that belong to the company from previous projects where you know how they managed the time. So we can use that. And eventually, the output, the final document that comes out of this process is the schedule management plan, as in a plan that shows the management for a schedule. And everyone is going to follow the schedule management plan. Everyone is going to follow the project management plan. Everyone is going to follow, you know, the project charter, and so these are documents that are used to communicate yourself to the client, to the team, and to your bosses. So usually when you're working on projects, the projects are huge. There might be 200 people working there. So even though you know what a project management plan is and what's in the project management plan, it's not necessary that everyone knows unless you have something in writing. So that's why you have a document called as the schedule management plan, a document called as the project management plan, a document called as as a cost management plan, and you just give it to your team members so everyone is in sync with the project. So the first one was plan schedule management. The next one is define activities. Define activities means what are we going to do for this whole project? What are the activities are? So for example, for designing the house, what are going to be the activities? Activities could be laying the foundation, putting the walls, laying out the rooms, putting in the doors, putting in the windows, putting in the roof, putting in the locks, putting in the bathtub, putting in the kitchen. So all these are activities. So I have to define, or the project manager with the team has to define these activities, and how long are these activities going to take. Like laying the roof might be faster than laying the walls, or laying the foundation might be faster than laying the walls. So we have to define what activities we are using and how long are these activities going to take. Again, it has 4 inputs, 3 tools and techniques, and 3 outputs. When we go to the third one, in the time management knowledge area, is sequence activities. So now we have to sequence these activities. What am I going to do first? Should I lay the foundation first, or should I lay the walls first? When should I lay the roof? Can I lay the roof before I even put on the walls? Obviously I can't. So that's why I have to make sure that I sequence these activities one after the other. Why? Because then I make sure I'm not wasting time. Because there's so many people working for this project, and every activity is related or connected to the previous activities or the activities after. So there is a lot of dependence. When one activity finished, the other one starts. Sometimes 2 activities go in parallel. So we have to make sure that we sequence these activities. And to sequence these activities, we use a project schedule network diagram. Now, when we go a lot more detail in project time management, that's when I'm going to show you how to draw a network diagram and how to place the activities in there. Okay. Then we have the next one is estimate activity resource. Now, what this means is I have an activity of laying the foundation for the house. Now I need a resource. I need to estimate how many people are needed to lay the foundation. Are we going to use machines? Are we going to use laborers? Are we going to use, what do you call it? Are we going to use some hi-fi, high-tech cranes. So we have to estimate the resource, right? Because we have to estimate how much the resource cost us. If we use the machine, then it might cost more, or it might cost less. Or if we use manual labor, it might cost even more, but it might be better. So who knows? So we have to estimate the resources required to put in the foundation. Then we need to put in the kitchen cabinets. So we need to have someone who could do the furniture in. So we probably need carpenters. How many carpenters do we need? When do we need them? For how long do we need them? And how much time are they going to finish this work? Are they available for work? Are they not available to work? So again, estimate activity resources has 8 inputs, 5 tools and techniques, and 3 outputs. Then I jump to the estimate activity duration. How long is these activities going to take? I already talked about that before because all these processes are related to each other and all fall under time management. So basically, again, what this means is how long is the activity for making the roof going to take? And I put it down as an estimate. How long is the carpenter going to take to put the furniture in? So all these are estimates that I should have as a project manager to decide the duration for that activity. And the last thing that I do in the planning process group for time management is develop the schedule. Now, I hope all you guys know what schedule is develop time, I would say. Develop what activities are going to take what time, and everything is put in this document. And the name of the document is called project schedule, right? That's an output. So it will have milestones, it will have Gantt charts, it identifies the start or completion dates for major deliverables, key interfaces, and again, it even has the network diagram. So all that goes into developing the schedule. So there's one more process in time management, and that process is monitor and control. Now, what am I monitoring and controlling? Now, I know I'm in the time management or schedule management process area or knowledge area, sorry. Then obviously I'm going to control the time. Now, how am I going to control the time? Now, there are different tools and techniques that are used to control the time. Like I will have performance reviews, see how everyone is working. We had a baseline. Everything is working with respect to the time baseline. We plan to complete this in 6 weeks. How far are we right now? Are we going to finish it on time? Are we going to finish it early, or are we going to finish it late? So that is done using earned value management. Again, these are formulas that you would use to calculate the time and the performance and where you fall right now. And these performance reviews have to be given to the client as updates. Hey, we've already done so much, we're going to finish on time. Or, oh, we cannot finish on time because of this problem or this resource or this reason, and we need extra time. Whenever it comes to extra time, you have to know it's extra money, right? So everything gets affected. So you have to control the schedule, which is controlling the time. And again, there are network diagrams and activity duration estimates, which have a lot of formulas, which we will do later on when we go in detail. And we have some questions and answers that we are going to go through when we get to detail for plan schedule management or schedule management knowledge area. So what we have done so far, we finished 3 processes, which is project integration management, project scope management, and project time management. Now the next process that we have is project cost management. Now in project cost management, how many processes do we have here? We have a total of 4 processes. 3 of them fall in the planning group, 1 fall in the control group or monitor and control group. This is really similar to project time management. Only difference is instead of managing the time, you are managing the money. You are making sure that you are spending the right amount of money in the right place, in the right time, for the right reasons. You don't want to overspend the money, and you want to make sure that everything gets done in the limited resource of money that your project is provided with. So starting with the first process in cost management is planning cost management. It's just like plan schedule management, right? It's just like plan scope management, plan schedule management, plan cost management. It's the same thing. But you have to plan this. Without planning, you're going to have problems in the future where project team doesn't know what's going on and people don't know what's going on, and all of a sudden you fall short of money. So you have to plan how you're going to spend your money. So you're going to use 4 inputs, you're going to use 3 tools and techniques, and 1 output. And the output obviously is going to be what? The output is going to be a cost management plan. Now again, the output you should know is a document. It's a document that shows how you are managing the money, or how you're managing the time, or how you're managing the project, or how you're managing the risk, etc., etc. Next one is estimate cost. Now, just like estimating time, over here what you're doing is estimating cost. How much is laying the foundation going to cost me? How much is laying the roof going to cost me? How much is finishing my kitchen going to cost me? How much is furnishing this website for the client is going to cost me? How much is this movie going to cost me? So all these are estimates that you have to give to the client as to how much it's going to cost you. Now again, these estimates, there are different levels of estimate. Is during the project, is before the project. Before the project, it's an estimate, right? You cannot give them a perfect number. It's always plus and minus. But as we keep going more and more deep into the project and keep getting our work done, then our estimate can be more and more precise and more perfect for the client. So basically that's what estimating cost means. Now the next process after estimating cost is what? Is determining budget. Now a question for your exam could be, I have estimated the cost for the project. What's the next thing am I going to do? So then the answer should be, oh, I'm going to determine the budget, right? Now it has 9 inputs, 5 tools and techniques, and 3 outputs. So what you get out of this is your budget for the whole project. Okay. Now there was one more left in project cost management, and that is, you guessed it right, it's control cost. So in control cost, what are you going to do? Obviously, as the name says, you're going to control costs. You're going to make sure that you stay within the budget. If, like in controlling schedule, you make sure you stay within the time frame that you have to finish the project. Same thing goes with controlling cost. You have to make sure that you stay within the budget for finishing the project with that amount of money. Now again, it has 4 inputs, 6 outputs, and 6 tools and techniques. Okay? So one of the output is cost forecast. Now I have to tell the client that, hey, I'm going to finish the project in this exact amount of money that you're giving us. Or they'll say, hey, you know what? You added a lot more things. So when I forecast the cost now, it's going to cost a lot more. Or there was a strike. Now the cost for the work goes up because of the strike. Now who's responsible for this? What happens? There's a lot of things going on, right? So everything has to be maintained on paper, has to be managed, so you as a company don't get in trouble, right? So this is a pretty big process, so that's why it has 2 different sheets, but it is a single process. Now let's jump to the next one. So we've already finished project integration, project scope management, project time management, project cost management, and the next one we have is project quality management. Now what are we managing over here? We are managing the quality. When we told the client that we are going to make you a nice car with these many features, I have to make sure I just don't give him features, right? There has to be a quality product. If I promise him to give him a car, I have to make sure that the car runs. I have to make sure that the car runs for so many miles. I have to make sure that the car has so many airbags and is this strong. If it gets in an accident, I have to make sure that the quality of the materials and the airbag and stuff is really good, so it's not going to create us problems. So that's what it is quality management. So I have to make sure I give the customer the quality that he was promised. I don't give him any more, I don't give him any less. Because if you want to give him more, only problem is you could get scope creep, where he asked for something that just have this much functionality, but you're giving him more, right? That goes into scope, so that's scope creep. But if he asks for uh, a wall to withstand so much weight, and you are giving him a wall that can withstand 10 times what he asked for, now again, what's getting affected over here? Now it's going to be costly, right? So you end up paying money off your own pocket, giving the client something that wasn't required. So for that, you have to make sure you're managing the quality. Now there are 3 processes in the PMBOK 5 guide. The first process is planning, where we plan quality management, just like planning cost management, planning schedule management, planning scope management. We have planning quality management. Next one we have is executing and managing, where we perform quality assurance. And the last one we have perform quality control. Now we have to understand what these 2 processes are. What's happening in performing quality assurance, and what is it different from performing controlling the quality. So there are different processes, different tools and techniques, different outputs and inputs that go into perform quality assurance and perform quality control. So what quality assurance does is basically we are planning how we are going to deliver the quality. And what quality control does is basically we make sure that the client gets what he asked for. So we control that quality. Okay, so one is planning and the other one is controlling. So that's the important difference between those 2. But again, as I said, we'll be going a lot more in detail. later on when I go individually through all these different knowledge areas. Then there are a lot more notes to follow with respect to quality control. Who was Edward Deming and how did he credit with being the greatest influence on quality management? Then the Deming chain reactions and quality versus grades, and what is Lean Sigma, what's the difference between quality assurance and quality control. Quality assurance makes sure you're doing the right things the right way. Quality assurance is process oriented. Quality assurance is failure prevention system. Quality control, on the other hand, makes sure the results of what you're done are what you expected. Quality control is product oriented. Quality control is detection of failure system. Okay, and then we have tons of questions that go along with quality control or quality management that we'll be doing in a lot of detail later on. Now let's jump to the next process in the process group in the knowledge area, which is human resource management. As the name says, is managing the resource, managing humans, managing people. How do you manage these people? Who are these people? Now, most of these people that you manage is going to be part of your team, right? You're working on a project. You're not the only one working on this project. There's someone doing the designing. There's someone doing the construction. There's someone getting the approvals. There's someone talking to the client. There's someone doing the advertisement. Someone getting the permits. So someone doing working on the construction. So there are tons and tons of people working, and it depends on what type of industry you're in. Uh, if you're working on a movie, so the resources for the movie would be actor, it would be lighting guy, would be someone who does the camera, would be a director, a producer, would be extras, would be talented people, right? So someone has to manage all these resources. Who's going to do that? Now, the project manager's job is to manage his team. So we are going to see what processes he has to go through to manage the team. So there are a total of 4 processes. The first process, which pretty much remains the same throughout your PMBOK 5 guide, is the planning, where you plan that process. So here you're planning human resource management. That's the first process. And second, third, and fourth process is acquire your team who's going to work on the project. You're going to develop the team, and then you're going to manage them. Okay, now let's go a little bit more detail of what the project human resource management process group talks about. Now, we've already done a lot of planning, right? We've done planning for the cost, planning for the scope, planning for the time, planning for the quality. Now this is planning for the human resource. It's basically how we are going to get these people. Where are we going to get these people? Do we already have these people in our company? Do we have to hire them? Are we going to hire them full-time? Are we going to hire them on contract? So all that is going to go in your planning documentation. And once you get done, your output is going to be a human resource management plan. Get it? And obviously it's in the planning process group. Now, most of your processes, or majority of your processes, is in the planning process group. I think it's 24. In PMBOK 4, we had just 20 process groups. So they added 4 more process groups. Like they added they added plan quality management, which wasn't there before. They added plan cost management, which wasn't there before. And I think they added a couple more, but I'm not sure which, but they added 4 planning processes from the previous one. So even if you are going in for your PMP test, within the next 3-4 months, and you're still going to follow PMBOK 4, it's always a good idea to know a little bit more, as in for PMBOK 5, because there are those 30 pre-test questions, and your pre-test question could come from anywhere, even though they are not graded for your test, even though they don't carry a weight for the test. But still, if you get those right, it builds that confidence level, and rather than getting so many questions wrong, you're getting all these questions right. So these 5 planning processes really doesn't take much time. So I would strongly encourage, even if you're doing your PMBOK 4 PMP exam in the next few months, just go through these 5 new processes that the PMBOK 5 have added to their book. Okay, so that was plan human resources. Then we have to plan how to we have to acquire the project team. Now this is blue in color. It falls in executing and managing. That means how we are going to execute something and how we are going to manage these people. Okay, so executing would be acquiring the project team. How are we going to acquire the project team? What tools and techniques are we going to use? We might have to negotiate to get these teams on board for doing the project with our uh, project sponsor and the project management office or the functional manager. Then we have to make sure what type of teams are we using. Are we using virtual teams? Is everyone going to work in office, or some people are going to work from home or from a different state, or it could be from a different country altogether. So we have to make sure when we are acquiring the project team, where is the team going to be located, right? Then we have to make sure what their time frame is to work on the project. Are they going to work throughout the project, or are they going to work just the beginning, or are they just come in at the end? So all that would go in acquiring the project team. The next one is developing the project team. Now you get the team on board. It's not 100% sure that everyone knows everything, because a project is something that is new. It probably has not even been done before. So you just get people who are experts and who know about the subject, but obviously they might have not even done everything like this before. So what you have to do is you have to develop this team. Now there are different techniques and tools used to develop the team. You could do team building activities. You could put everyone in one area and work together, help each other. You can give them training. It could be a formal or informal training. So all that would go in develop project team. Now, after you develop the project team, the next thing you have to do is manage project team. Now, it's not easy to manage people. You might have a lot of different types of people working on the project. Some might need a lot more attention. Some might need less attention. Some are troublemakers. Some are causing problems and conflicts. Some have issues. So you have to make sure that you get the right people on board so that there's no problems for the project to get completed on time. If anyone is creating any problems, how are you going to manage that? Or there might be that you might have to give them a warning. You might have to fire them. You might have to, uh, you know, you have to make decisions. And managing the project team is extremely important, and it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of interpersonal skills and talking skills and management skills, just to make sure that everything is in line and working in for the project. Okay, so uh, these were the 1, 2, 3, 4. These were the 4 processes in the human resource management plan. Again, 1 in planning and 3 in executing. Now again, a simple sample question for your PMP exam could be, the project manager has developed the project team. What does he have to do next? So once he has developed the project team, he has to make sure that he is managing the project team, right? Another question could be the a lot of people have problems on this project team. They keep fighting with each other. Now, what is the project manager going to do in that particular scenario? What technique is he going to use to solve that problem? Okay, so there'll be a lot of questions on especially this one, managing the project team, but we'll get a lot more in detail later on when I get to the questions and when I get more in detail with the human resource management knowledge area. Now we just have 3 more left, which is communication management, risk management, procurement management, and stakeholder management. In fact, we have 4 more left. So we already finished 6. We have 4 more. And let's go to the communication management. Now the communication management has 3 different processes. One is in planning, one is in execution, one is in monitor and control. So let's jump to the first one in planning. As it goes with every single one, is plan communication management. It's basically I have to plan how I'm going to communicate with the team, how I'm going to communicate with my boss, how I'm going to communicate with the client, how am I going to communicate with everyone, with my project team, everyone working on the same project, or the consultants or the contractors. So we need to have a communication plan to work together. Why? Because a lot of projects fail, and the main reason is because there was some communication problem. People didn't know who to go to when they had a question. They had a big, huge communication problem, and that's why the project failed. So you have to have, as a project manager, a communication plan, as in how people are going to communicate with each other. And then for that, you're going to use different tools, you're going to use different techniques, and then the output obviously is going to be a communication management plan. The second one is manage communications. Now, how am I going to manage these communications? How am I going to talk to my clients? How are we going to interact with each other? Are we going to talk on the phone? Are we going to send emails? Are we going to have web-to-web chat? How am I going to communicate what I need to get done, or what I need from the client, or what I need from the team, right? So there has to be different communication methods. Sometimes it's a virtual team, so you probably never even see these people. So the whole communication goes on emails and on the webcams and web meetings and stuff like that. So we have to make sure, we have to manage that everything is set in the company. Do we have a service where we can talk to other people on the phone or on the internet, or can we have live meeting, or all that stuff has to be managed, right? So I'm managing communications as a project manager, just to make sure that there are no communication problems. Now next one is monitor and control communications. So there are all these communications back and forth from the client, from the people, from the team, and I have to control them. So why I have to control them? So it doesn't go out of hand, right? For example, the client calls and tells a team member that he wants something to be changed because it doesn't look right, or there's a problem with it, or it's not something that he wanted to. So you have to make sure that that communication from the client goes to the right people, right? He's not just going to call your boss and say, hey, I want this to be taken care of because it's not exactly what I wanted it to be. It could be fine if it was a small project with 6-7 people working, but when you have really big, huge projects, there are like 200, 300 people working on that project. And every time you go ask them, hey, how come you didn't do it? And they'll be like, no one ever told me this. I never got an email. No one ever called me. How am I supposed to do it when I don't even know? So the client has called you, and then everything got lost in communication, and you end up not finishing the work, and so the project doesn't finish on time and doesn't finish on the cost and the money, and then there's a lot of problems, right? So you have to control the communications between the team, the people working, the stakeholders, um, your client, your boss, everyone, right? So let's jump to the next one. This is risk management. We have 6 different processes, and most of the processes are in the planning area, and we have 1 in the monitor and control. So plan risk management, identify risk, perform qualitative risk analysis, perform quantitative risk analysis, and the last one in the planning is plan risk responses, and monitor and control is control risk. Again, everything is color coordinated, so you should know where we are at right now. And when it comes to the orange color, we are in identify risk. Now what this does is identifying risk before it happens. Now I am going on a road trip to Mexico. So I have to identify the risks before I go there, just to make sure that my whole trip with my family was good and safe. So I have to identify, maybe go see the weather conditions. Oh, is the weather going to be good on the weekend, or is it going to rain, or is there going to be a storm? I have to make sure that my car is tuned up and running fine, the tires look good. I have to make sure that uh, every everything on the other side is going to be good. There are no riots. Everything is open. So I have to identify these risks in the future. So when I'm working on a project, then, for example, if I'm building a house, and I have to make sure when it's going to rain, because that day or that time, people cannot work. They have to take off for some reason, right? They're not going to put the roof when it's raining. So I have to identify those risks and tell it to the client, hey, these are the risks that I have identified, so I need some extra time for this. Like, I need a reserve. I need extra money for this, probably, right? Extra money, extra time, and you have to make sure that everything is documented as much as you can. So you will talk to your team and identify all the risks that you think that are going to happen in the near future that will affect your project. Again, you use inputs, which is 13. That's a lot of inputs. Then you use 7 tools and techniques to identify the risks. And the output is only 1, which is the risk register. So in the risk register, again, it's a document where all the risks that were identified are listed. Okay, so that's identifying risk. Now let's go to perform qualitative risk analysis and perform quantitative risk analysis. Okay, now these are different types of risks that are associated with the project. So the probability and impact assessment is done in qualitative risk analysis, in where pretty much you assign the level of risk that is there. If it's a low risk, it's a high risk, it's a medium risk. On the other hand, when you go to perform quantitative risk analysis, you are giving it a quantity, as in how much of a risk it is. And again, you use different tools and techniques of performing qualitative and quantitative risk analysis. A really important chapter, and a knowledge area when it comes to the PMP exam. So the one after perform quantitative risk analysis is plan risk responses. Now again, the question could be, the project manager with his team has already performed quantitative risk analysis. What's the next thing he's supposed to do? So you should know is the next thing is he has to plan the risk responses. Now risk responses being you know that there is this risk and this risk happened or is going to happen, and what are you going to do about it? So you might want to avoid the risk, you might want to transfer the risk, accept the risk, you might have to uh, assign some money towards the risk. And there are different types of risks, like positive risks or negative risks, and how you're going to use that for your project. Now, again, when we go a lot more detail in this area, I'm going to talk about these risks. So we already talked about the planning part in risk management. The only one that's left is controlling the risks. Now, how do you control the risk? Just like how do you control cost? How do you control time? How do you control people? So how are you going to control the risks? And there are 4 inputs, 6 tools and techniques, and 5 different outputs. So you're going to do risk audits. You are going to do a variance analysis. Again, when we get to this, I'll be talking a lot more detail about it. Now let's jump to the next group, next knowledge area, which is procurement management. Now this has 4 processes, and if you look in here, leaving the initiating process, it has a process in all the 4 different process groups, starting with planning, execution, monitoring and controlling, and closing. Okay, now let's go to the first one, which is plan procurement management. Now procurement is something is you are procuring some people to do your work. Okay, so you send out bids and then you give them a contract, and there are different types of contract that they can work with. For example, there is a fixed contract, there is a cost reimbursable contract, there is time and materials contract. So you plan the procurement as if how you are going to go through the procurement phase. Now this has tools and techniques where you're going to do some marketing research, market research, some meetings. So in market research, you are going to try to find who is the best person who can do this job well and job right. So you might want to hire them or give them the contract or award them the contract. And the next one is making or buying analysis. Now some work it's more feasible to make it in-house rather than to give the project out or outsource it or get some to a company that can do that piece of your project. For example, I am an architecture firm and I do all the designing for my project, but the construction part I don't do it. I give it out to a contractor who does the construction, and I might give uh, the uh, the structural design to a structural engineer. I might give the plumbing design or the plumbing work to a plumbing company, or a mechanical like air conditioning to a mechanical firm. So all this goes under procurements and planning procurements, and either planning to make or buy uh, the piece of work that we are planning to do as an organization. So that goes in plan procurement. Then the next one is conduct procurement. Now this procurement is a process. How do we conduct it? So we have to select the sellers, we have to make agreements, we have to put everything in the agreement, which is pretty much the same as a contract, and what is going to be done for that particular procurement or a particular job. So that all goes in conduct procurements. Then the next one is monitoring and controlling, where we are going to control the procurement. We are going to see that everything is getting performed according to the contract. So that's what is done in the control procurements. And the next one, which is the last one, again, is in the yellow color. It falls under the closing group, which is called close procurements. Now, when everything is done with, now we are satisfied with, our company is satisfied with the work that is done by this company or the contractors, and we need to do, the next thing is to close procurements. So we have to do procurement audits to see everything was done accordingly. If there's any problem with the procurement, then we have to do some negotiations. Sometimes, actually a lot of times, there are problems where the work is not done with respect to the agreement or the contract, and then people go to court and sue each other. Okay, but that does cost a lot of time, money, and work. So we do procurement negotiations, not mostly project managers, but they have the procurement team. They're the ones who would do the procurement negotiations, and then eventually close the project or close procurements. So this is where the buyer provides the seller with a formal written notice that the contract has been completed with respect to the requirements. Once this is done, then our project is closed. So all these four processes are from the procurement management knowledge area. Now let's go to the last one, and this is a new process knowledge area that was added to PMBOK 5. It wasn't there in PMBOK 4, so I'm pretty sure you will have a lot of questions on this new uh, new knowledge area. So the stakeholder management. Now basically what this says is, how are we going to manage stakeholder? Now if you are working on a project, there are a lot of different stakeholders involved. Like if I'm working on designing an interface or some database or some website for the city, then a lot of different types of people and stakeholders are involved during the whole process, during the design process, during the construction process, during the permit process, during the approval process, and you have a lot of these stakeholders who are part of the team. So you have to make sure that you manage these stakeholders. You have to make sure that you communicate with these stakeholders. You have to make sure that everything goes according to plan, and all the stakeholders are satisfied with what you are providing them. So this has four processes. Now the different processes is identifying stakeholders. Now if you see, this is in the green process group, and green is initiating. So initiating has two different processes, and the second process is identifying stakeholders. And which one was the first process? Now if we go all the way up, you will see the first process in the green, and this was what? You guessed it right. It was develop project charter. So only two processes in the initiating group: develop project charter and identifying stakeholders. So Now, how do we identify stakeholders? So what tools and techniques that we use to identify these stakeholders, and what is the output? So once I identify all the stakeholders, and what I'm going to come out is with a document called as the stakeholder register, where I have all the stakeholder information, as in which organization they work for, what is their position in the organization, where do they work, what is their role in the project, how are they going to help us in the project, what is their contact information, what deliverables are they going to be a part of, in what part of a life cycle are they going to be a part of. Now, are they going to be an internal stakeholder, or are they going to be an external stakeholder? What type of a stakeholder is it? Is it going to be a neutral stakeholder? Is he going to support the project? Is he going to be against the project? Is he going to resist the project? So we have to identify these stakeholders to make sure that the project goes smoothly and the stakeholders are well informed of what's going on with the project. After the identification of the stakeholders is done, we need to plan stakeholder management. Now again, this is the same thing as planning cost management, planning human resource management, planning time management. So this is planning stakeholder management. Basically, how are we going to manage the stakeholders? And it has 4 inputs, 3 tools and techniques, and 2 outputs. Again, when we get to this more in detail, in this knowledge area, I'll be talking about everything that you see over here in a lot more detail. Once the planning for stakeholders management is done, I have to make sure that I manage these stakeholders engagement. Now, a project can fail if the stakeholders are not engaged in the project. Some stakeholders don't have time for the project. They're just a name there, but they're pretty strong when it comes to the position of being a stakeholder, but they just don't have time for you. So how are you going to manage their engagement? How are you going to make sure that they are part of this project from the start to the finish, or in just a particular phase or a part of the life cycle? So managing stakeholder engagement is one of the most extremely important things which can make or break the project. Now, the last one of all these 47 processes is control stakeholder engagement. So this one was managing stakeholder engagement, and the red one obviously is in control process group, which is controlling the stakeholder engagement. Now we have 4 inputs, 3 tools and techniques, 5 outputs, and we are doing it through information management system. So this is like a tool that helps the project manager capture, store, and distribute information to stakeholders about the cost of the project, about the time, how much time is taking, are we on track, are we not on track, and what's the performance like. And with this information management system, you have reportings and presentations that you need to give it to your stakeholders in a timely manner to keep them updated about what's going on in the project and what's the status of the project. So this was the last process, a total of 47 processes in PMBOK 5. Now, once you go through these processes a few times, I would say at least 3 times, then you have to make sure that you know the grid uh, really, really well for the exam. Because what you see over here is 85% of your exam, and if you master every single process, you know where it is horizontally or vertically, where it lies, what knowledge group, what process areas, what comes before, what comes after, then you are really good and you're well set for the exam. But make sure that you go through this video. It will be on YouTube for you guys to help understand what you're looking forward for your PMP exam, and I wish you all the best when you take this exam, and keep looking for more and more videos that I will be updating soon, starting from every single knowledge group and all the 5 different process areas. This is Tutor Ali, and I will see you soon. Thank you.